The mathematics of survival. The North Atlantic Ocean does not forgive. That isn't a figure of speech. It's physics. It's biology. It is the kind of brutal, indifferent mathematics that naval officers study in survival training, allowing them to understand with clinical precision exactly how long a human body can function in water cold enough to stop a heart. The answer, in water temperatures hovering just above freezing, is a very brief window of meaningful consciousness. After that, the muscles begin to fail. The blood retreats from the extremities, rushing toward the core organs in a last, desperate act of preservation. The fingers stop working, the arms stop working, the mind begins to drift. Eventually, a person in those waters is almost certainly dead. After an extended period of exposure, there simply is no medical protocol. There is no survival story. There is no case study written in any military manual that accounts for a human being remaining alive after prolonged submersions in the winter North Atlantic, which is exactly why Lieutenant Commander Garrett Thorne's hands went completely still on the armrest of the rescue helicopter the moment his pilot's voice crackled across the headset. "Sir." A pause. The kind of pause that means something is profoundly wrong with the words before they even arrive. "You need to look at the water." Garrett pressed his face to the side window. He saw the wreckage first, a section of hull riding the surface at a sharp angle, gray against gray, ocean against sky. Just another piece of debris in a search corridor that had already yielded nothing except cold water and disappointment. Then, he saw her. "Bring us down," Garrett said. His voice was quiet, almost calm, the kind of calm that descends when the brain, flat out, refuses to process what the eyes are reporting. "Sir, the temperature reading says—" "I know what the temperature reading says. Bring us down." The helicopter dropped altitude. Garrett reached for the intercom connecting him to Declan Vance, his rescue swimmer, who was seated near the rear door in a wetsuit designed to handle temperatures the ocean would otherwise use to kill a man quickly. Declan was already suiting up. "Commander." That was Declan, a veteran of the naval special warfare community with a long career. He had pulled people from wreckage across multiple oceans and one very bad river in a country whose name he still didn't mention in public. He had never once hesitated at a jump. He hesitated now, not because of the cold, not because of the distance, because of what he was looking at through the open door as the helicopter hovered above the churning surface. The woman was on her back. Her face was tilted slightly upward, pale as bone. Her dark hair spread flat against the broken hull section beneath her. Her clothing was soaked through and frozen at the edges. Her lips carried that particular grayish-blue tint that every survival medic learns to recognize as the color that means you are probably too late. In her hands, locked against her chest, with both arms wrapped tight around it, the way a person holds something they have already decided to die protecting, was a rifle. "Commander," Declan said, his voice entirely shifted. "She's got a weapon. I can see that. What's the protocol on—" "The protocol is you go in and you bring her back," Garrett said. "The rifle comes with her. Do not attempt to separate them. Do you understand me?" A beat of silence. "Yes, sir." Declan went in. The moment he hit the water, he would later say, was like being punched by the entire ocean simultaneously. Every exposed inch of skin registered a temperature that the human nervous system interprets purely as pain, because the nervous system intuitively understands that this is an environment where human beings are simply not meant to be. He reached the wreckage rapidly. He reached for her, and her eyes opened. Declan stopped moving. He would describe it later during the debrief, sitting in a heated room with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands. He would choose his words carefully, because Declan was not a man given to dramatic language. He would say her eyes opened, and she looked at him. Not the way someone looks at you when they're confused, hypothermic, or half-conscious. She looked at him the way you look at something when you're actively deciding whether or not it's a threat. He said it took a moment. He said it was the most uncomfortable moment of his professional life. "I'm Navy," he said out loud, there in the freezing water, treading in a survival suit while she stared right through him from the wreckage. "I'm here to get you out. You're going to be okay." She didn't speak. She evaluated him for another second. Then, she let him take her. But she never let go of the rifle, and he didn't try to make her the impossible survivor. They brought her aboard, and the crew chief immediately began emergency warming protocols. Mylar blankets, heated oxygen. The medic, a young petty officer named Rowan, ran a check for vital signs twice because the first set of numbers made him think his equipment was malfunctioning. Her core temperature was low, critically low by any standard measure, but her pulse was steady. Her blood pressure was reduced, but not absent. Her pupils responded to light. She was alive in a way that defied all medical logic. "Prolonged exposure?" Rowan kept muttering, almost to himself as he worked. "Days." Garrett stood near the far wall of the helicopter cabin, watching the woman and the rifle, and said nothing for a long while. The rifle was unlike anything he had seen before. He had been around weapons his entire adult life. He knew what a sniper system looked like. He knew what custom work looked like. He knew the difference between a weapon modified by a skilled armorer and a weapon designed from its very conception with a singular, specific purpose in mind. This was the latter. The stock was unusual. The barrel configuration was unusual. The scope mounting was unusual in a way that suggested its designer was working from mathematical absolutes, rather than standard operational needs. The whole weapon possessed a quality that Garrett could only privately describe as purposeful, as if every single component had been selected not for convenience or availability, but for the achievement of something highly specific. He desperately wanted to know what that specific thing was. He also knew that indulging that curiosity right now, with a nearly dead woman wrapped in the thermal blankets mere feet away, was exactly the wrong priority. "Rowan," he said, "what are we looking at medically?" "Honestly, sir?" Rowan paused. "I don't know. She should be dead. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm saying the numbers I'm seeing don't match extended ocean exposure at this temperature. Either she found shelter I'm not aware of, she possesses a physiology I've never encountered, or..." He stopped. "Or what?" "Or she survived on something that isn't written in any manual I've ever read." Garrett looked at the woman again. Her eyes were closed now. Her grip on the rifle had loosened fractionally, but it had not released. Even unconscious, she held on. He keyed his radio to base. "This is Thorne. We have a survivor. Female, no identification, critical condition, but stable. We have one unusual item of interest accompanying the survivor. Requesting immediate medical and security at the landing zone. And get me Adler." A crackle of static. "Commander, did you say no identification?" "That's what I said." Another pause, longer this time. "Understood. Adler will meet you at the pad." The architect of the weapon, Silas Adler, was the kind of man who could look at a piece of mechanical equipment briefly and tell you things about it that would take most people extensive research to discover. He possessed a mind that organized information instinctively, efficiently, and always in a way that made perfect sense the moment you saw the result. He was waiting at the landing pad when they touched down, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, watching the medical team rush toward the helicopter with the expression of a man trying very hard to look calm and not quite succeeding. When they moved the woman to the stretcher, Silas got his first look at the rifle. He didn't say a word for a long moment. "Silas," Garrett prompted, "I'm looking. What do you see?" Silas turned and met his eyes. I see something that shouldn't exist. He let out a breath. And I mean that in the technical sense, Commander, not the emotional sense. I mean, this weapon should not exist, because building it would require access to manufacturing capabilities and material specifications that are not publicly available and not officially linked to any program I'm aware of. Garrett felt the thing he had been trying not to feel since the helicopter ride, a deep cold that had absolutely nothing to do with the Atlantic. Can you get into it? I can try. Silas looked back at the rifle. But I want to tell you something first. In my experience, when someone holds a weapon like this with their last ounce of physical strength after days in the ocean, they're not protecting the weapon. They're protecting what's inside it. Garrett looked at him. Inside it? Silas nodded slowly. The stock configuration is wrong. There's added density where there shouldn't be any. Now, either this is the worst piece of custom work I've ever seen, or there's something built into the frame that isn't part of the weapon system. How long do you need? Give me hours. You have less, Garrett said. And Silas? No external systems. Nothing networked. No reports going up the chain until I give the word. This stays in the room. Silas studied him for a moment. That's an unusual order, sir. It's an unusual situation. The awakening. The medical team at the NATO facility in Iceland had seen a great many things over the course of their service. They had treated burns, blast injuries, and conditions resulting from human beings doing extraordinarily dangerous things in extraordinarily unforgiving environments. They were not, as a professional group, easily rattled. The woman they were now treating rattled them, not because of her injuries, though they were severe, not because of her vital signs, though they remained inexplicably inconsistent with her reported exposure duration. What rattled the medical staff, and what Dr. Alara Sterling, the facility's lead trauma physician, would write about in careful, neutral, clinical language in her preliminary notes, was the reaction the patient had when the nursing staff attempted to separate the rifle from her hands while she was unconscious. She woke up, not gradually, not with the slow, confused surfacing of a person climbing out of deep sedation. She came awake the way a switch is thrown, from completely still to completely aware. Her hands repositioned on the rifle before her eyes had even fully focused, and she spoke one sentence, in a voice that was quiet, destroyed by exposure, and absolutely crystal clear. You don't touch that. Dr. Sterling, who had been standing at the foot of the bed reviewing charts, looked up. The woman was staring directly at her. I understand, Dr. Sterling said, using the practiced tone she had honed over decades of emergency medicine. The tone that communicates. I am not your enemy. I am trying to help. I will not push. No one will touch it. You're safe. A long silence stretched out. Where am I? Iceland NATO Medical Facility. You were found in the ocean. Something moved across the woman's face. Not relief, not gratitude. Something vastly more complicated than either of those things. Something that looked, to Dr. Sterling's clinical eye, like pure calculation. How long was I out there? We believe it was an extended period. Dr. Sterling paused. Though I have to tell you, I don't entirely understand how your survival is possible. The woman closed her eyes for a moment. She remained still. What day is it? Dr. Sterling told her. Another heavy silence. Then, he's dead. I'm sorry? Nothing. Her eyes opened again, flat, exhausted. I need water. Of course, and I know what you need, the woman interrupted, looking at the ceiling. My name is Sloane. That's all I'm telling you right now. Find whoever is in charge of my rescue. Tell him I'll talk to him. Only him. Dr. Sterling considered pushing the issue, but decided against it. She went to find Garrett Thorne. The conversation Garrett received the message and went immediately, though he paused outside her door for a moment to consider what Silas had said, about what it means when someone protects a weapon with their dying strength and what might be hidden inside it. He pushed the door open. She was sitting up in the bed, an act she shouldn't have had the physical capacity to perform given what her body had just endured. The rifle was leaning against the wall right beside her. She was watching the door with the exact same quality of intense evaluation that Declan had described. Not aggression, not fear, but pure assessment. She was a young woman, her dark hair still damp from the ocean. Her eyes carried the distinct quality of someone who has spent a great deal of time observing the world and very little time being observed. Commander Thorne. It was not phrased as a question. That's right. He pulled a chair close to the bed, but didn't sit down just yet. And you're Sloane, for now. What does that mean? It means I have more names than I've needed in recent years, and I haven't decided yet which one is actually mine. She looked at him steadily. You ordered your team not to separate me from my weapon. Yes. Why should I? Garrett finally sat down. Because whatever was worth holding on to out there in the freezing Atlantic is worth understanding before anyone else touches it. Something shifted in her expression. Barely perceptible, but it shifted. That was a good call, she said quietly. I've made worse. A pause stretched between them. Outside the door, Garrett could hear the institutional hum of a medical facility. Footsteps, distant voices, the soft mechanical rhythms of monitoring equipment. Your man, Sloane said. The one who came in after me. He was in the water with me before he secured me to the cable. Declan, yes. Tell him he has good eyes. He looked at me before he reached for me. Most people don't do that. Most people reach first and look later. A brief pause. In my experience, the ones who reach first don't usually last long in situations that require reading people quickly. Garrett looked at her, his expression unreadable. You were evaluating my rescue swimmer in Arctic water while suffering from severe hypothermia. Habit, she said simply. Then your weapons specialist, has he touched the rifle yet? The question landed carefully. No accusation, just information gathering. He's been asked to examine it, Garrett said. Under controlled conditions. What has he found? I haven't heard yet. She nodded slowly. You'll hear soon. She glanced at the wall beside the bed where the rifle rested. When he tells you what he finds, I need you to come back here immediately. Don't discuss it with anyone else first. Don't send it up the chain. Don't report it. Come directly to me. She locked eyes with him. Can you promise me that? Garrett studied her. He thought about the order he had already given Silas. Nothing networked, nothing reported. Stays in the room. He thought about the fact that he had given that exact order before she even asked him to. I already did, he said, another shift. This one far more visible. Why you? She asked, and for the first time her voice carried something beneath the flatness. Something that sounded distantly like the echo of a person who had not expected that answer. Because whatever you survived to protect, Garrett said. I don't think you did it to have the wrong people find out about it first. Sloane Abbott looked at Commander Garrett Thorne for a long moment. Then she said, You pulled me out of the ocean, Commander. I'm going to try very hard to make sure that doesn't get you killed. The door swung open. Rowan looked in, his face pale. Sir, he said, Adler needs you. He says you need to come right now. Garrett stood. He looked at Sloane. She was already staring at the rifle. Go, she said quietly. And Commander? He stopped at the door. She didn't look at him when she spoke. Her voice was flat, precise, completely stripped of drama. Whatever number he shows you, Whatever distance, it's real. The unthinkable truth. Garrett walked out. Behind him, in a room in a NATO medical facility on the edge of the Arctic, a woman who had survived waters that should have killed her leaned her head back against the pillow, breathed slowly, and waited for the world to catch up to the truth she had already delivered. Somewhere in the facility, a weapons specialist named Silas Adler had just opened something he did not fully understand yet. And far to the south, in a climate-controlled building, where powerful men had poured drinks over the news of her death, the first electronic signal was already moving through the world's infrastructure like a ghost, quiet, patient, and absolutely certain of where it was going. She had always known she would survive. She had planned for it. Every choice, every calculation, every grueling moment holding that rifle above the freezing water while her body made desperate calculations about what it was willing to sacrifice. It had all been built around one simple mathematical certainty. She was not finished. And somewhere, embedded in an encrypted partition that no one had yet found, an entire world of truths was waiting to be born. Garrett walked fast. Not running. Running draws attention, and attention was the last thing he wanted inside a facility full of people who asked questions for a living. But he moved with the controlled urgency his body defaulted to in tight situations. Rowan kept pace beside him, saying absolutely nothing, which told Garrett far more than words ever could. Rowan was young, but he possessed the distinct quality of military medics who had seen enough to understand when profound silence was the only appropriate response. The room Silas had commandeered was a maintenance space near the back of the facility's secondary wing. It was chosen, Garrett noted instantly, because it had no windows facing the main corridor, only one entry point, and 0 network terminals. Silas had taken the order seriously. Garrett pushed the door open. 3 members of his team were already inside. Vaughn, who had a background in naval intelligence support. Gideon, who had spent years attached to special operations and possessed the quiet, watchful quality of a man who processes disturbing information without broadcasting a reaction. And Declan, still in partial wetsuit gear, sitting in a metal chair with his elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the table in the center of the room. The rifle was on the table. Silas stood beside it. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled up. He had the look of a man who had been working with intense, unwavering focus and had just stumbled upon something that shattered that focus completely. "Close the door," Silas said. Garrett closed it. "Tell me." Silas placed both hands flat on the table. He looked at Garrett the way a person looks at someone when they are painstakingly selecting the most precise words available, knowing imprecise ones would not do justice to what they found. "The weapon itself," Silas began, "is unlike anything in any catalog I have access to. The barrel is custom machined to tolerances unachievable with standard military manufacturing. The scope is a hybrid design. Optical elements I recognize from elite civilian manufacturers, assembled into a configuration that shouldn't work nearly as well as it clearly does. The trigger mechanism is hand-fitted, all of it." "Who built it?" Garrett asked. "Someone with access to resources that officially do not exist, and someone with a highly specific mission requirement that drove every single design decision. This is not a rifle built for general use. This is a rifle built to do one thing, at a distance no standard platform could ever achieve." Gideon shifted in his chair. "What distance?" Silas didn't answer right away. He reached under the table and retrieved a laptop. Air-gapped, Garrett noted, completely disconnected, and turned it so the screen faced the room. "The stock," Silas said. "You were right about the density. There's a secondary compartment built into the base. Composite shell, self-sealing, designed to be totally waterproof. Inside is an encrypted data module. Military-grade encryption, but non-standard. It took me hours to crack the outer layer. And the inner layer? Garrett asked. Still working on that. But the outer partition, Commander? There are ballistic records in here spanning years. Shot logs, every engagement she conducted, atmospheric data, wind calculations, environmental variables, target confirmation codes, mission records. Vaughn leaned forward. Confirmation codes from who? That, Silas said, is an excellent question that I cannot yet answer because the issuing authority is referenced by a code designation I don't recognize. But whoever issued these missions had massive operational infrastructure. These aren't random engagements. These are tasked operations with pre-mission intelligence, real-time support data, and post-mission confirmation protocols. The room absorbed this heavy reality. Garrett spoke quietly. How many engagements in the outer partition? Numerous confirmed operations spanning years. Declan looked up from his chair. And nobody found her all that time? Silas looked at him. Nobody was looking. Or rather, the people who knew what she was doing believed they controlled her completely. She was their asset. You don't surveil an asset, you direct them. Garrett moved to the table. He stared at the laptop screen. Endless lines of data, coordinates, numbers, the dry, precise language of ballistic documentation. The kind of records that describe extraordinary violence in the cold vocabulary of mathematics. Because mathematics does not flinch, does not editorialize, and does not ask whether any of this is right or wrong. Show me the last entry, he commanded. Silas reached over and scrolled. He stopped. Garrett read the screen. He read it once, then he read it again, because the first reading produced a number that his brain fundamentally refused to file correctly. He looked up at Silas. Is this accurate? I've verified it multiple times. Then say it out loud. Silas straightened. He looked around the room, at Gideon, at Vaughn, at Declan still frozen in his chair, at Rowan standing near the door. Then he looked back at Garrett. In the tone of a man who understands exactly what he's saying, having already processed his own shock, he spoke. An impossible distance. 1 round, 1 confirmed kill. The atmospheric data shows intense crosswinds with variable gusts. Significant elevation differential between the shooter's position and the target. The flight time of the projectile was a handful of seconds. Nobody spoke. Garrett thought about what those seconds meant. He thought about a bullet leaving a barrel, climbing into the sky, and beginning its long, terrifying arc downward toward a target miles away. He thought about every variable existing between the trigger pull and the impact. Wind shifts, temperature drops affecting air density, the rotation of the Earth itself introducing a drift that required mathematical compensation, the heartbeat of the shooter, the breathing, the absolute, unyielding stillness required in the body while the mind performed calculations that most supercomputers would struggle with. 1 round, 1 kill. The record, Gideon said softly, not asking a question, just voicing a thought. The documented historical record, Silas clarified, is significantly shorter. This distance shatters any confirmed engagement in recorded history by a massive margin. Vaughn stood up. He walked to the table and stared at the screen. He read the numbers, then stepped back. That's not possible, he breathed. The data says it happened, Silas replied. Data can be fabricated. This data can't. The environmental readings cross-reference perfectly with meteorological records from the date in question. The atmospheric conditions documented in this log match the actual recorded weather at those exact coordinates. If someone fabricated this, they fabricated it using real weather data from days ago, which means they fabricated it recently, which means it happened, Garrett finished. Yes. Garrett looked at the screen again, at the coordinates, the date, the confirmation code indicating a successful mission. "What's the target designation?" he asked. Silas was quiet for one beat. Then he reached over and pointed to a line on the screen. Garrett leaned in and read it. The hand he had resting on the edge of the table stopped moving entirely. "Say that name out loud," Garrett ordered softly. "Warren Croft," Silas said. The room went dead still. Warren Croft. A name that loomed in defense, contracting circles the way certain mountains dominate maps. Massive, unmovable, apparently permanent. A man whose company held highly classified contracts across government agencies, whose personal network included people whose names appeared on lists requiring top-tier security clearances just to view. Warren Croft, who had died days ago in what official reports preliminarily described as a sudden medical event, pending investigation. Pending investigation. Garrett stood up straight. He looked at Silas, then Gideon, then Declan, who had finally risen from his chair, standing completely rigid with the expression of a man recalculating every single thing he thought he knew about the world. "He didn't have a medical event," Declan said. "No," Garrett replied. "He didn't. And the woman we pulled out of the ocean made the shot. Then someone destroyed her vessel." He paused, "and left her there because they thought the ocean would handle the cleanup." The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of professionals realizing that the information they were holding had implications extending far beyond the walls of their secure room. Vaughn broke it. "Who sent her after Croft?" "I don't know yet," Silas said. "The mission-issuing authority is still behind the secondary encryption layer." "Who wanted her dead after she made the shot?" "That," Garrett said, "may be the same people who sent her, or someone else entirely. Either way, they had the resources to locate her vessel at sea and destroy it swiftly after the operation." He stopped. He remembered what Sloane had said. "Whatever number he shows you, it's real." She had known. She knew exactly what Silas was going to uncover before he uncovered it. "I need to go back to her room," Garrett stated. "Commander." Silas's voice stopped him. "There's something else." Garrett turned. Silas wore that expression again, the one from the landing pad, choosing his words with surgical precision. "The outer partition of the data module," Silas said. "It's clean. Organized mission records, but the encryption structure tells me something about how the module was built." He took a breath. "The outer partition isn't the whole module. There is significantly more space inside, and there's a second encryption layer protecting it. It's not the same as the first layer. The first layer I broke, the second layer is distinctly different. It suggests it wasn't built by the same people who built the outer section." Garrett stared at him. "She built it herself." "That's my best guess. Yes. Whatever is in the inner partition, she put it there separately, and she secured it using her own custom method. The outer partition is the mission record. What an organized operation logs and keeps," Garrett mused quietly. "But the inner partition is what she was collecting." Silas nodded. "I believe so." The imminent threat, Garrett's mind raced, organizing the intel the way he'd been trained to under pressure, not in sequence, but in relationship, connecting the pieces. A woman trained by a shadow organization to conduct long-range eliminations, directed at targets she was told were dangerous, operating within a structure that provided immense support. Years of operations, then something changed. She started collecting. "She was building a case," Garrett said. "While she was still inside, she was working, following orders, maintaining operational cover, and simultaneously documenting every piece of evidence she could reach." "That would require extraordinary discipline," Gideon noted. "Not an argument, an acknowledgement of profound respect. Yes, Garrett agreed. It would. He pictured the woman surviving the freezing North Atlantic by refusing to release a rifle packed with accumulated truth. He remembered the stillness in her eyes, not shock, not damage, but the calculated patience of someone waiting for reality to catch up to her math. Silas, he said. The inner partition. How long to crack it? Unknown. Could be hours, could be days. Depending on her method. He paused. But Commander, I think she could break it herself in moments. I know, Garrett said. Get the laptop. You're coming with me. He was halfway to the door when Vaughn spoke up. Sir, if Croft is the target, and the people who sent her also tried to kill her, that means there is an organization out there right now that thinks its shooter is dead, its mission is complete, and its secrets are rotting at the bottom of the ocean. Garrett paused, hand hovering near the door. Yes, he said. How long before they figure out she's not dead? Garrett turned and looked at Vaughn, Gideon, and Declan, the man who had seen her eyes open in the deadly water. Probably less time than we'd like, Garrett answered. He opened the door. The corridor outside was quiet. Standard institutional lighting, distant, unremarkable sounds, nothing alarming, just a hallway full of ordinary details. But Garrett walked through it, knowing that ordinary was about to end. He reached Sloane's room, knocked once, and entered without waiting. The situation could no longer afford the luxury of politeness. She was sitting up, the rifle still beside her. She looked at Garrett, then at Silas carrying the laptop, then back to Garrett. Whatever she read in his face caused her expression to shift into something resembling relief. The specific relief of a person who has waited a long time for people to understand and has finally watched it happen. An impossible distance, Garrett said, not a question. Yes, she replied. Croft. Yes. They tried to kill you after. Shortly after confirmation, she said calmly. They knew where the vessel was. They always knew. I expected it. Garrett felt a sharp pang of alarm mixed with deep respect. You expected it. I planned for it. She glanced at the rifle. The rifle is rated to float given the density of the composite stock. The hull section I landed on? I positioned myself on it before the explosion, not after. She met his gaze. I had a brief window between the moment I realized the charge was active and the detonation. It was enough. Silas made a sound, a stifled noise of sheer mathematical disbelief. Sloane turned her attention to Silas. He found the second partition. I found it. I can't open it. She evaluated him openly, brief, complete. You're good, she noted. Most people wouldn't even find the seam between the layers. It took me a while, Silas admitted honestly. And I'm still not entirely sure how you structured it. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I'll open it, she said, but she turned back to Garrett. First, I need you to understand. The outer partition is the mission record, documentation of what they tasked me to do. She paused. The inner partition is what I found while I was doing it. What did you find? Garrett asked. Everything, she said softly. I found everything. The word hung heavy in the air. Garrett thought about Warren Croft. He thought about classified contracts, dark money, and an infrastructure capable of wiping an asset off the map without leaving a fingerprint. They think you're dead, Garrett said. Yes. How long do we have before they learn otherwise? Sloane looked at the ceiling, running a calculation she had clearly run 1,000 times before. There's an automated check-in protocol. It pings the communication node. When the node doesn't respond, because it's at the bottom of the Atlantic. The system flags for manual review. She paused. The flag interval is regular. The vessel was destroyed days ago. They would have confirmed wreckage via satellite. They believe the asset and the module are gone. She locked eyes with him. But if anyone in that network has reason to monitor data from this facility, any intercept, any medical query touching my biometrics, they'll know. They'll know you survived, Garrett said, which is considerably worse for them than knowing I'm here, because the module is intact, and the inner partition contains enough to end them. All of them, not just Croft, the entire network, the money, the contracts, the names. She took a breath. I spent years collecting it while they watched me work, never suspecting their instrument was also their undoing. Silas stared at the laptop. Declan stood silently in the doorway. Garrett looked at Sloane Abbott and understood with crystal clarity that she had outcalculated everyone. We need to move fast, Garrett stated. We do, and I need to ask you something directly. Are any of the people who run this network inside this facility's command structure? Garrett held her gaze. I don't know. That's the honest answer. I know names, but their penetration into NATO structures is something I haven't fully mapped. She paused. Which is why I told you not to report up the chain. And why I didn't. They looked at each other. A naval officer who trusted his instinct, and a woman who had spent years preparing for a moment that required exactly that kind of trust. Outside, a silent signal was moving. Neither knew it yet, but somewhere a status indicator had just changed color. Time was up. The invisible war. The signal Silas eventually detected didn't announce itself. It was a passive monitoring thread embedded in the facility's standard communications, pulling metadata quietly, logging access patterns without tripping alarms. Silas found it purely because he was looking at the network's architecture, not its content. He stared at his screen for a few seconds, then he keyed his secure radio. Commander, we have a problem. Garrett was in the corridor, mentally compiling a list of personnel whose access he couldn't verify. Talk to me. Passive surveillance thread in the base network. It's been running long enough to pick up her medical intake and biometrics. Garrett processed this instantly. They know she's here. If it's real time, yes. If it's delayed, we have a tiny window. Tracing it will alert them. Don't trace it, Garrett ordered. Leave it. The moment we touch it, they know we're onto them. Right now, we have whatever time it takes them to scramble a recovery team. Depending on staging, that could be a matter of hours. Start working on unlocking that inner partition. I need what's inside before anyone arrives. Garrett pushed into Sloane's room. She read his face immediately. They found the monitoring thread, she said. He stopped. How did you know there was one? Because there's always one. It's maintained by a contractor called Helix Systems Integration, a subsidiary of a holding company Croft controlled. The temperature in the room plummeted. The surveillance here was built by the people trying to kill you? Yes, I suspected it, but couldn't confirm without the inner partition. Garrett pulled up a chair. Sloane, I need all of it, right now. If people are coming, I need to know exactly what I'm defending against to protect you, my team, and that module. She looked at him. Releasing the truth felt like a physical burden shifting. And so, she started talking. She had grown up in the foster care system. She was a teenager when a woman named Ms. Caldwell came to her group home and administered a unique mathematics assessment. It was designed to find a specific kind of mind, one that processed spatial relationships and fluid variables instinctively. She scored off the charts. Soon, she was moved to an advanced educational program. They trained her in applied physics, trajectory modeling, and eventually, firearms. A man named Lawson took over her physical training. He taught her the absolute perfection of long-range precision work. He told her she was being prepared to eliminate untouchable criminals who harmed innocents. "You believed him," Garrett said gently. "I was young, alone, and he told me my abilities could protect people. Yes, I believed him." She became operational as a young adult. The first targets seemed to fit the profile, but eventually, she received a mission package for a woman named Linnea Frost. The dossier claimed she was a criminal financier. Sloane's meticulous back-channel research proved otherwise. Linnea was a forensic accountant building a massive case against defense contractors. She had young children. "I reported a target verification failure," Sloane said quietly. "They overrode me. Lawson came to me and said, 'You were chosen for your capabilities, not your judgment. Trust the mission.'" "What did you do?" "I refused the mission formally, and then I ran." She spent years surviving, moving constantly, staying invisible, and while she ran, she collected. She hacked into their systems, intercepted communications, and built an impenetrable case against the shadow network Croft operated. She encrypted it all into the inner partition. "I needed to take Croft out of the system before I could expose the evidence," she explained. "As long as he was operational, he could suppress any investigation instantly. He had done it to Linnea Frost. I confirmed she was alive and safe before I took the shot. Then I had a window. I used it." Garrett absorbed the sheer weight of her journey. A brilliant mind, manipulated into becoming a weapon, who found a moral line she absolutely refused to cross and paid the price for it. "The organization," Garrett said. "Are any of them in NATO?" "Yes. 3 confirmed individuals in mid-level command, which is why they know we're here. They will send a recovery team, a unit designated Vantage. They move in small cells. They always have an inside contact, and they do not attempt extraction. Their mandate is termination and retrieval." Garrett made his decision instantly. "I'm moving you to a blind spot in the facility, and I'm getting my team." "I need to open the partition," she said. "There is a federal prosecutor, Harrison Cole. He operates outside their sphere. If I open it, I need a direct transmission pathway to him that bypasses standard comms." "Silas can build it," Garrett promised. "Trust me." "I trusted you when you didn't take my rifle," she said. "I'm still trusting you." The Stan Garrett stepped into the hallway. Walking toward him, with the casual stride of a man who belonged, was an unfamiliar facility worker. His ID badge was clipped to his right chest. Standard protocol dictated the left. It was a tiny detail, practically invisible to the untrained eye. Garrett didn't react. He let his gaze slide past the man, then quietly stepped back into Sloane's room and shut the door. "We're moving. Now," he commanded. She didn't ask questions. She slung the rifle over her shoulder with practiced efficiency. Garrett radioed his team with a silent click code: "Consolidate on my position." They navigated to the secondary mechanical wing, a maze of humming generators that masked sound and thwarted surveillance. Silas was already setting up. Vaughn and Gideon arrived moments later. Declan shadowed them perfectly. "We have company," Garrett briefed them low and fast. "One confirmed inside. Badge placement wrong. We assume command is compromised. Rules of engagement: minimum force, protect the asset and the module. Do not initiate a firefight that creates witnesses. Contain them." Vaughn looked at Sloane. "What exactly are we protecting?" "Evidence sufficient to dismantle a shadow network that has run illegal covert operations for over a decade," she answered firmly. "If it doesn't reach a prosecutor tonight, they rebuild and walk free." Vaughn looked at Garrett. "I'm in." "Silas, transmission pathway to Cole." How long? I need time to configure an air-gapped relay through the emergency satellite uplink. You have minutes, Garrett said. Silas typed furiously. Garrett looked at Sloane. The moment it's ready, open it. Garrett and Vaughn stepped out to walk the main corridors, performing a casual patrol to draw the spotter's eyes away from the mechanical wing. Garrett identified 2 more Vantage operatives, a woman positioned to monitor 3 hallways at once, and a man feigning a phone call near the exit. A 4-person cell, 1 inside, 2 holding the perimeter, 1 likely outside managing logistics. His radio clicked. The pathway was ready. Garrett and Vaughn returned to the safe room. The lights were dim to emergency red. Pathway stable, Silas confirmed. Open it, Garrett told Sloane. She pressed a highly specific sequence into the rifle's composite stock. A small panel clicked open. She extracted the data module, connected it to the air-gapped laptop, and typed with blinding speed. The screen flooded with data, financial records, active government contracts, black ops funding streams. This network isn't historical, Silas whispered, staring at the screen. It's running right now. Transmit it all. Now, Garrett ordered. Silas initiated the upload. A progress bar crawled across the screen. Movement, Declan warned, touching his earpiece. They're committing. Sloane stood up, shouldering the rifle. She moved to a tactical blind spot near the door. They'll try the lock. If it holds, they'll trigger a distraction elsewhere to split your attention. Do not look away from the door. The handle jiggled slightly. The lock held. Seconds later, a loud crash echoed from a distant corridor. A textbook distraction. Nobody in the room flinched. They held the door. Transmission complete, Silas announced breathlessly. Cole confirmed receipt. Garrett exhaled sharply. Light them up. Nobody leaves. What followed wasn't a chaotic shootout. It was a surgical containment executed by highly trained operators. Gideon and Declan intercepted the first Vantage operative in the East Hall, subduing him swiftly. Vaughn caught the second attempting to slice into the comms room. The third, the woman, realized the operation was blown and calmly walked out the secondary exit. Garrett let her go. He wanted her to carry the message back to her masters. You lost. The cost of justice. The facility went quiet. Garrett returned to the safe room. Sloane was standing exactly where he had left her, rifle in hand. It's done, Garrett told her. The transmission is secure. The cell withdrew. She looked at her weapon. Then she looked at him. Is it enough? She didn't mean the evidence. She meant her sacrifice. The years of running, the isolation, the sheer weight of her choices. It's enough, he assured her. Far away in Virginia, Harrison Cole was already making encrypted calls, locking the evidence behind impenetrable legal firewalls. Warrants were being drafted. Corrupt NATO officers were being quietly detained. The untouchable network was fracturing. Sloane sat down, staring blankly at a cup of coffee. Garrett sat beside her. Commander, she said quietly, Silas didn't just find a second partition. I built a third. Garrett froze. A third? The first was my operational record. The second was the evidence I gathered while running. That's what we sent. She took a breath. The third contains decades of historical data. The true origin of the network. Given to me by Lawson before I disappeared. Garrett stared at her. The man who had molded her into an assassin had secretly been collecting evidence to destroy his own creators, ultimately passing the burden to her. It needs to go to Cole, Garrett said. I already sent it, she replied smoothly. While you were out of the room. Garrett let out a dry chuckle. She had made the calculated choice to circumvent him to ensure the data's survival. Silas is going to be annoyed you used his pathway without asking. A genuine warm smile finally touched her lips. "I'll apologize to him." The radio crackled. It was Silas. "Commander, Cole just confirmed the third partition. He's requesting authorization to elevate to a joint Department of Justice task force. He says this is historic." Garrett looked at Sloane. "Tell him yes. Tell him the woman who built it says to use all of it." Sloane looked up. For the first time since she was pulled from the freezing ocean, the tactical mask vanished completely. She just looked entirely human. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you talk to a lot of federal investigators. It will be exhausting, but you're not running anymore. And you?" "I'll have to explain to a military tribunal why I ran a rogue operation inside a NATO base." Garrett smiled faintly. "It'll be an interesting meeting. But I followed my judgment. I'd do it again." "So would I," she said softly. Rowan appeared in the doorway. "Commander, secure call from the Deputy Attorney General." Garrett nodded. He looked at Sloane. "Give me a few minutes." She stood up and handed the rifle to Garrett. "Hold this for me." Garrett took the weapon. It felt heavy, not with metal and composite, but with the weight of her survival. It felt like undeniable testimony. It was the physical manifestation of a woman who had calculated the cost of justice and willingly paid it. She walked out of the room to finally wash the salt from her skin. Garrett stood there, holding the rifle, listening to the morning sounds of the facility waking up. He thought about the unfathomable distances, the impossibly cold water, and the unbreakable will of the woman who had conquered both. She had brought a storm back from the ocean, and as she walked down the hall, she left the darkness behind her. Not because it was gone, but because she had finally earned the right to step into the light.